Hello everyone, thank you very much for coming here. My name is Hasan Arslan. I live in New York, but I teach in Western Connecticut State University. Actually, I just started there. So since I'm the only speaker, so you have to bear with me, I'm gonna talk about a little bit about myself because that's why I ended up doing this research. So I'm originally from Turkey. It's been 18 years. I came to Texas to pursue my PhD, having a law degree from Turkey. Started my PhD in my first semester. 9/11 happened, and then the dean of the school said, "Hey, we're looking for someone who can help us with the terrorism research." Since I'm coming from a Muslim country, right? So I joined this. No, seriously, that's how I ended up. So they recruited me. They said that, okay, we're looking for someone who knows the European legal system, who knows the Muslim culture, who knows that area. So can you contribute to our book? I said, yeah, fine. I'm looking for an assistantship. I will join you. I need money and everything. So, right? And I will be working with the dean. So anyway, we established this research institution, what we call it the ISVG, Institute Study for Violent Groups, which was founded by the Department of Justice, and then military joined us. I was one of the original 7 students as a doctoral student. Then this institution grew bigger and bigger. I became an assistant director in charge of the open source data collection. So I learned everything about the collecting data. And at one point, we have 40 students under my authority. I will supervise them, train them, teach them. And then we had guests coming from international law enforcement community. I was the guy giving them brief information about the data, terrorism research, and everything. So that's how I built my interest on data collection. So 2009, I quit ISVG. My dean got a position at University of New Haven. I took a 1-year visiting scholar position there. Then it hit me. I was watching a program, a TV documentary on Court TV at the time. I think it was called, now it's True TV. Court TV had a documentary on police shootings. They were talking about there was no data. This was in 2009. This was even before the scandalous, the police shooting cases that has been going on, Ferguson, Missouri, all those things. So terrorism was also slow back in those days. 2009, the business was, so I needed to find another research. So I said to myself, I can build the next police shooting database. Since I learned everything about collecting data, and if I find that information, I can build it. So that's how my interest on use of force and the police shooting began in 2009 at University of New Haven. Then I took a 2-year position at Western New England College in Springfield. I was there, but there was no interest on big, large research. Then Pace University in New York recruited me because they had a huge Homeland Security Master's program. They were looking for a terrorism expert, so I joined the faculty. I was there for 6 years until last spring semester. So then Western Connecticut University said, and we had this kind of love and hate relationship because they were always seeking me for their faculty. They even offered me twice. I declined them twice. They finally came up with a good faculty position and everything. I said, okay, I'm coming with you guys, and joined the Western Connecticut State University. So I took every research with me, and now I'm at Western Connecticut State University. So I'm representing the faculty for the first time. Yes?
Ask a question? I don't know.
Yeah, please. I'm the only speaker, so I think we have 1 hour. So please feel free.
I always think that there's no data, nobody's collecting anything until the Washington Post
Yes.
and the...
And I will tell you a couple of interesting stories about some of the variables. In 2010, I have the record. I went to a conference in Las Vegas, and that's the first time I talked about my conference, my research on police shootings. At the time, Las Vegas Review-Journal was the only, local newspaper was collecting data on shootings in Vegas, Metropolitan Police Department at the time. And I realized that after my presentation, again, I don't know if there were people in the audience, but I have no idea, reporters and everything. So then I went home and I looked it up because I was using that as the shootings taking place in the, Nevada. So I realized that a couple of the variables I mentioned during my speech added onto the website. So I kind of contributed how they should collect information, but of course nobody asked me that, and and I didn't put a copyright, claim. Anyways, so Washington Post came in 2015. And I've been presenting this since 2010, 2011, 12, 13, ACJS, ASC, which is our nationwide conferences. So every time I talk about such data analysis and everything, and every time I also expanded my data because I learned, I need this information too, I need that too, okay? But today, of course, I'm not going to talk about everything about the shooting database, but we will be, first I will talk about how we collect data, and then give you some descriptive analysis from the database, and then I'm going to start talking about the lawsuit aspect, and hopefully that will be the end of the the conversation, and I'm open to any kind of questions after that. All right, so this basically research topic, the logo that you see, actually the project, I call it the SHOT, Statistics Help Officer Training Database. Officially, was built at Pace University. When I was at Pace University in my first semester in 2012, I designed the logo, I came up with the idea, and then I started to expand my data project. I started hiring students who could help me. And the students who are involved in this project, they really get good jobs. I can't really pay them a lot, but I can write them a good reference letter, and then they can go to federal government in the investigative skills as well as intelligence departments. So as you know, shootings happen not frequently, but the way the media depicts the relationship between the police and the public is, unfortunately, it's very picky. They really select certain cases, and then they portray it. Keep that in mind. There are almost 18,000 law enforcement agencies in this country, 1.1 million police officers, from local, state, county, state, and law enforcement, federal law enforcement. So you have 17 federal law enforcement, almost more than 300 state law enforcement agencies, and then the bulk of them goes to the local police departments. Okay, and according to statistics, UCR, Uniform Crime Report, collected by FBI every year, released, we have a fatality of 60 to 70 police officers. Most of them are dying because of accidents, not really shootouts. But they didn't collect any kind of information. In 2016, actually, FBI announced that they will start collecting information, but they haven't released anything yet. So probably, I'm guessing they're in progress. And those are just the facts of the situation. The number of shootings, actually deadly shootings, I'm not talking about the people injured by the officers, we are suspecting that around 300 to 400. Okay, this number was up or more, we don't know. I mean, I started to collect from 2000 because I was watching that court TV document. They were talking about number of bullets fired by the officers, and this was from 74 to 1990. They didn't have any after that. That's hit me like, oh, I can start collecting data from 2000 and upward. So it was 2.4. So when an officer shoots, based on their training, okay, generally at least 2 rounds being fired from the officer's gun, right? And it hit me. That's why I called the database name Statistics Help Officer Training. So I can still use this data during the training of an officer, that the police cadets can learn what is the national trend of such incidents, not in their unique city, but also nationwide. So Washington Post joined the data collection after the Michael Brown incident, the Missouri, the events and everything in 2015. But it's interesting, actually, the Guardian, the English newspaper, the British newspaper, also is leading this charge. In fact, they have a better data, and this was confessed at the time, FBI director, that the United States government actually lacks information about the police shootings. The British newspaper has more information about the shootings in America. So that's the reality. How we collect this information? Very simple, open source. I don't ask the police departments. Even you try, they don't give information if you're not a law enforcement. I'm a scholar. I don't have a law enforcement background. So they always give me a hard time. I don't bother. So I collect my own method since I learned a certain skill set for the last 15 years. So this is one of the the methods, just the one. This is actually a news bank, which gives you an access to more than 800 local newspapers nationwide. Newspapers, you can break it into regions, country, state, and everything. So what you do, let me go up. You develop your search terms. You write the search terms like in between quotation marks, officer-involved shootings. You click it, and you select North America, United States, and then a certain information pops up, given the timeline and everything. Then I reduce it because now I'm facing almost like millions of data. So I select a state. I come up with a timeline. I narrow it down. Then now I have the all shootings of that particular state, okay? Then I find the individual. This is a very time-consuming and meticulous job. Okay, this is how actually open source data collection is done by the federal government too. So let me give you that. How you use your Facebook, how you use your social network. This is like they do this with the fancy machines. Okay, so every word that's been used. So I find individuals, I put the individual's name in quotation marks. Now I have more information about that particular individual. Everything about, from his first time shot by the cop to the lawsuit, and whether a lawsuit dismissed, affirmed, or everything. Okay? And again, it's really meticulous work. It requires a lot of time, and I spent my 2 hours almost like on a daily basis just to verify that information. So that's why I teach the students, the undergraduate students right now. I'm currently working. In fact, I ask them to write papers, college papers. I give them certain states, train them. They can write their papers. They can also contribute to the database, and then they can go to the conferences and present as the experts, and then publish it using the actual, data sets.
Is this a free data?
It's open source. Well, you have to access through a library or a university or institution. It's not open to individuals. You have to pay for it. Otherwise, I mean, my university, Western Connecticut, doesn't have it, the library. So I still use the university that I graduated, Sam Houston State University. They have it in Texas. As an alumni, I pay the fee, which is $35. I have the full access, and that's it. That's how I gain. I never quit using it. Okay, so that's just the primary resource. If I can, of course, it's much better than LexisNexis. It's much better than any other newspaper source out there. I can guarantee you that. I've been using it since 2001. We were using this actually for the domestic terrorism issues when we were leading the ISVG. Yes?
It assumes that all of the shootings are public information, and is that correct?
Okay, so this is an interesting, go ahead. So is it related to that question? Okay, all right. So let me answer to that question first. This is what I have observed. I think the more the media portrays such incidents, the more the local and the nationwide newspapers started to publish it. Because and I'm going to show you some trends from my database. Until 2008, 2009, the numbers of shootings are very low. It doesn't mean that it is actually low. It's just, it wasn't published. It's not available to the public. So the only way to confirm it, probably to going to the police departments and court documents, which I try to do, okay, and then verify that information and see, it's a triangulation method, basically, see it matches, it's close. But I came to a conclusion, no, the media wasn't interested in such incidents until the Michael Brown incident. The Michael Brown or the 2012, couple of other incidents in New York, kind of opened the path that the media said, all right, this is it. This is police brutality. This is like the Rodney King again. And boom, they started to really, publish.
So for this open source data system, this is kind of program specific, but how, I know sometimes like information evolves, like how does it handle discrepancies in terms of like bullets fired, etc.?
So this is what I learned when we were doing terrorism research, because now you have, especially international terrorism, you receive a report, Reuters says there's an attack took place in Iraq, 5 people died, and nobody claimed the responsibility, and then another Associated Press says, oh, Al-Qaeda claimed the responsibility, right? So you have like 2 primary agencies giving some kind of conflicting information. Well, you look at the government sources, whether any government press release from the local to the international talking about such incidents. So I learned that, like verification, because government, well, they lie, we know, but it's hard to make such argument unless clear evidence exists. Other than that, you take the word of the government official statement as like a reliable information, because that's where the courts use. Courts do not make judgments based on newspaper arguments. Courts make judgments based on whatever the police department press release, whatever the district attorney's press release, that kind of information. So this is what I did. I'll find an incident, talks about certain discrepancies of the persons, whether there's a gun or not, right? There's always this debate. The police claims that there is a gun. The victim family says there was no gun. And you look at the district attorney and the court documents. That's where they testify. And then actually they diagram. That's where the witness experts always. Internal investigations, that's also useful. But not every police department does that. Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department does it. Houston Police Department does it. NYPD does it. No, they do not share such details, but the agencies that I mentioned, they give such information. Other than that, small police departments, forget about it. You know, they don't. So this is just where the students begin, their data collection, and then they start, collecting. So let me show you what we have so far from 2000 to 2018, and it's an ongoing project. Still, we're collecting it. Okay, it never stops. I think it will stop whenever I get old or I die. That's the idea. So and we built a database, by the way. It's called SHOT. We're going to launch it hopefully at Western Connecticut because I brought it to a different university. I'm trying to work on their computer system and everything. So hopefully it will be launched, I'm saying, in a year. It's a state school. Don't wait too much. Connecticut is not a rich, wealthy state. So we have 55 variables, more than 1,000 sub-variables. So we have 5 main categories. You have the source information. Everything is sourced. Nothing is being entered without the source. That's number 1 rule. That's what I learned as a researcher at ISVG. Everything. And we validate government sources more than newspapers. You always check the court documents first. You always check the police department, and then you check the newspapers. Okay. This kind of shows you from 2000 to 2017. That's what I meant. See, nationwide, it does not have, using certain search terms, I guarantee you, these are actually low numbers. There are actually more, there should be higher numbers than this. But unfortunately, that's not the reality. So let's look at who was 96% of the people being shot by the cops. And number 1 rule also for entry is, when you look at the officer-involved shooting, the official description or definition by the police department is when an officer, draws his weapon or her weapon, even like fires, that's called officer-involved shooting. We don't take that definition. The bullet must hit the person, cause an injury or fatality. That's the only way we collect that information. Okay. So what you're seeing actually, these people are injured or killed by the police, departments. So gender-wise, 96% male, 4% females. This is kind of interesting to show you based on the age groups. So I thought, let me show you from people who are younger than 20, older than 50, and then each numerical category. So what we are seeing actually, most of the people being injured and killed in their 20s. And I will show you some discrepancies when it comes to ethnicities. Like how's the whites, how is the blacks, how is the Latinos, and all those things. Here, what you're looking at the distribution of the ethnicities. You have 41% whites, 30% blacks, 25% Hispanics, and Asian. Now you might consider, hey, the whites are high, but look at the ratio, overall ratio, right? Even with that, still blacks and Hispanics, really minority groups, are being targeted. Almost, same as rate with the whites, but even more in certain parts of the country. These numbers really go up. The least amount category is the Asians, and there are certain traits. I work with the computer scientists from Purdue University in Indiana. We did a presentation on policing styles. Like, are there any policing styles region to region? Like the police in South, how is that different than the police in Northeast? Are there unique cultures when they're making decisions, right? And shootings is one of those, decision-making process. So let's make this a little bit more, interesting. So here again, you see the age groups, right? And you see the ethnicities, blacks, Hispanics, white, and Asians being represented. I also added a 3rd variable, said let's look at their ratio of being subject to shootings, injury, and fatalities. So what you're seeing actually, this is kind of interesting. In very young, people younger than 30, mostly you see the blacks being targeted. What I call it, okay, this is based on, again, several factors, whether weapons possession, whether the weapon is being brandished, used, or other, like not a firearm but a sharp tool. I have very generic categories. I also have the specifics, brandish, fired, used as a weapon, driven, automobile, vehicles. According to Supreme Court, a vehicle can be used as a weapon. If you drive your vehicle towards an officer, you don't have to hit the officer. Even driving towards an officer, it kind of justifies his position to shoot you. Okay, Supreme Court kind of backs the officer's position. So I collect such data, and what I found actually, blacks and Hispanics are being represented high, and then you look at the older ages, you see whites mostly, and there are certain traits, okay, certain traits to certain behavioral decision making. So here, I wanted to add the mentally ill. See, Washington Post, when they start collecting that information, they didn't have that. So when I did my presentations on the mentally ill and everything, then I realized that, oh, they have the mental illness element right added into the Washington Post page. I don't know whether I contributed that or they got the idea, like they said that, hey, we need this because it became a phenomenon at the time in the newspapers. So this kind of shows we have 4 categories, right? Or default setting is always assuming that people are mentally stable when they engage with the police officers, and you kind of talk about mental illness, right? They're discovered later. That's what the case actually in most of the times. This is how the escalation starts. Okay, reading thousands of newspaper articles and police reports. Most of the time it's simple 911 call, right? Your relatives, your father, your mother says, hey, my son is behaving erratically. Can you come and help us? And the officer arrives, okay? They don't define that erratic behavior. The officer arrives on the scene. It's just a domestic dispute in their own eyes. It's not a mentally insane case. When they suddenly see someone who's not cooperative, who's engaging actually, right? The officers are demanding like, stop, stop. And the person, even this is a weapon in the eye of an officer. You might consider it, what is this? Just but the officer doesn't see it that way. In their training, okay, they follow the policy guidelines. Again, I built this database not try to justify their position or justify the other position. I'm trying to approach, what the cops, think. So a person holds this and starts plunging, even like making towards some moves. That's it. The officer, in his own mind, justified. Boom. Unfortunately, this happens. Now, the sad thing is the family suddenly like, what just happened here? We sought your help, but you killed my son. You killed my. See, the mental illness. There are certain police departments in this country. Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department is one of them. NYPD is another, I think. Illinois. They build actually certain programs. Houston Police Department. They have a unique team. If they confirm the subject, the individual facing with the cop, has a mental illness history, they send these teams rather than they're sending the individual officer, engaging. So it's kind of interesting. Most of them are mentally stable. Then you have this second highest is the mentally ill, close to 13%, I guess. And then, suicidal and depressed. These are the categories of suicide by cop. Yes?
Question though, why do you have suicidal and depressed separate from mentally ill?
Because, not these people, like they want to die. They have a mental illness history, but they don't want to die. These people, yes, they do. Something happened in their private life. There's a phenomenon in the research, suicide by cop. They intentionally face with the cops, and they want the cops to kill them, even yell, scream, and the cops are forced to make that, shot once the person makes the move, like even shoving a gun, pointing a gun, and they die. But these people, most of the time, the cops don't know it in many of the cases, but they have a history of mental illness, and they were shot by the cops because, according to eye of the cop, it was justified. Okay, the intoxicated, again, see, this is where the person is under the influence of drugs or alcohol. So that's why it's low, because most of the newspapers always mention this and this. It's 100%, because they are looking for the cops killed a mentally ill man or a woman, okay, or the cops, the person wanted to die. It's a suicide by cop phenomena. That's where the departments justify their position. Okay, so here is again looking at the ethnicities. This is getting interesting. You see the certain ethnic groups. I'm not trying to generalize or stereotype, but you see that like as if like certain ethnicities have certain traits, like when it comes to the behavioral decision making. So what we see, the whites, suicidal and mentally ill, they have the highest numbers. And I can add an age to that. Any white males over at the age of 50, most of the time they have a mental history or they are suicidal. Either they lost their home, they lost their jobs, they are having domestic issues at home, That's why they want to die. And they, engage with the cops and boom, things happen. When you look at the, the blacks and Hispanics and Asian, you see that actually the young, right? You have seen, remember the age, 20 and younger. So you see that some kind of a behavioral trait. There is sometimes guns involved, like a kind of brandish or cops see as a threat, or, for the Hispanics, it's the, the mentally ill numbers kind of close to, the suicidal depressed numbers, kill and everything. So the Asians are the lowest group, like they seem to be doing fine, mentally stable, very, do not have a lot of mentally ill cases. Intoxications are also, kind of low. Okay, so there are a couple things you're looking at. Here, this one kind of sums up the police department perspective. Okay, I collect the police department's name, which is not very common to find. They don't want to share that. Only court documents release such information, or press releases from the police department share that information. We also find out how many officers were on the scene, out of how many fired their guns, out of how many total rounds. I collect that information, how many of them hit the body, what parts of the body as well, because I can use that for the training purposes. Let me give an example. In one case in New York City, 9 cops faced with a person who just killed his boss, a disgruntled employee, was walking in New York City in daylight. 9 cops were approaching from different angles to the suspect, and then the suspect realized that he was being noticed because he was like walking in a dress-up suit and everything in Wall Street.
Sorry, need to interrupt for a second. There are a couple of cars parked in the construction area. It's plate 6DF7644, EFR 1279. Close to the one? Okay. Sorry.
Welcome. So, what was I talking about? The cops? Yeah, they surrounded the guy. Okay, all right. Stick. Okay. Yeah. Anyway, so they, immediately the guy noticed the cops, and then there was a shootout. 9 cops, right? One guy, boom, almost 15 people injured. The guy died, but more than 40, a lot of rounds fired in the daylight, and it was this close. This shows a training, problem. Okay, you have like several cops trying to subdue a man, and in daylight that shows a training, lack of training, or some problem. Anyways, so I divided to again local, sheriff, state and federal. If there are more than one agency in a shootout, that I call it the assistant, right? So I call them a combination of multiple agencies. So as you can see, local police departments engage more shootings, followed by the sheriff county, and then you have the combination multiple. The federal is less. The reason it's less because I added that in 2015. I made a decision, maybe I should start also paying attention to federal law enforcement too, because I didn't start, it wasn't my part of focus. So that's why we still need to work on that. I'm guessing probably there is more than that. Here, this shows the experience. Because I wanted to understand, is there any kind of correlation between more experienced officers or rookie officers and their involvement in the shootings, right? So this is kind of interesting, actually. Experienced officers engage more. How do you explain that? Here's a good question for you. I would ask that to my students. The experienced officers find themselves more in shootings.
I was just thinking they get used to the customs and the traditions, and so they kind of just, from experience, they just go, oh, this is how to quickly get into the situation.
Okay.
The newer ones obviously have more fresh training in the sense of they know exactly how to handle and they're following protocols, versus the older ones have skipped protocols in a certain sense. They've just kind of adopted their own routines on how to handle situations.
That's good explanation, but I will add it some other.
I would like that there should be a special school for the police.
Okay.
How to handle gun. Education. Where manner, discretion. Where and when. And what are the conditions under which they could shoot?
Well, see, you didn't mention about the education, right? But you mentioned about the education. Education matters. First of all, the cops, there's actually a number, 20 years, kind of benchmark. Most cops involved in shootings, generally 15 and 20 years of experience. when we look at the trends of the recruitment of the police departments in this country, remember, to become a police officer, they don't require college education in this country. Only 1/3 of the police departments out of 18,000 law enforcement require a college degree. So that's one explanation. So what you're seeing with the experienced officer, actually probably military background, which I would love to get that data, but departments do not share personal data. Like, I would love to see, because remember 2002 when the US military started the operations in Iraq, and there is this long term of veterans coming back. Police departments hire those individuals. They are battleground. So military mentality, survival mentality, you neutralize. You don't think, I will leave this guy, give a second chance. You shoot to kill. So, but that's my theory. I don't have a data to back me up. But what I see, maybe it's the impact of that. Most of the veterans have coming from military backgrounds. They're engaged. They do not have college degrees, some of them. So, so they kind of find themselves in a fight or flight mode, and they choose to kill the individual or shoot and neutralize the person.
But there should be a historical background. What to go to history? The government should go to history of individual employees before it can handle.
Well, see, again, you can't pursue this. Like, no data is available. If there was such data, you could make that argument, and you could press the city governments. All right, find officers with, maybe evaluate them psychologically, especially the ones with the military background. Find or recruit more educated officers. So they don't really share personal data. I mean, it's like a taboo.
Like, for instance, let me conclude. It happens. It may not be peculiar here, but in my country, they call it, how do I call it? This attitude of shooting erratically, accidental discharge.
Yeah, accidental discharge.
And
Yeah.
there shouldn't be anything of such in any realm of human life. Why will you say accidental discharge? What are you discharging? Why accidents? When you're looking.
Except New York Police Department. Since 1972, New York Police Department made an exception. Every time an officer fires their gun, whether it's accidental, other than the training, during the training, they have to be reported. Their supervisors have to be instructed, and the officer is going to be put into a disciplinary charge. That's one of those. That's the NYPD only.
Is that, but that's on a local level? Or
1972, only NYPD, because of the Knapp Commission findings. At the time, 1970s, there were a lot of corruption, and cops were accused of killing people and this and that. That's one of the curbing that corruption. That's when they said, since 1972, when an officer draws his weapon as an NYPD officer, fires it either air, anywhere, or this accidental discharge, he will be or she will be put in an investigation.
Because it's my understanding that like federal agencies like the FBI and
Probably.
stuff, they do that already.
Probably, yes, probably.
I mean, you can't talk about officer-involved shootings without talking about bias. So there's
Yes.
implicit bias, there's explicit bias.
Correct.
And so you must have some theory about how the age affects the
Correct,
bias.
correct.
Also, there's information coming out now about the way actually doing the work exacerbates bias. So
Correct.
The 20. So do you want to just talk on that a little bit?
I mean, in my data set, basically, I can't ask the question like whether in this situation the officer has some kind of bias, but when I look at the analysis, I can see, when you look at the younger age groups, obviously the minority is being targeted, because it can tell me, this is how I, sometimes analyze the behavior. Police officers see minority young men as a threat, more threat than seriously. And then police officers see older white men more threat. Yeah, but they don't see the younger white male or female as a threat. That's my conclusion. Like for some reason, minorities in their own eyes, when they're younger, they're more dangerous. When they're older, they don't. But they look at the whites, the majority group, in a way.
Yeah, but we're talking about that it's more in people who have been doing the job for 20 years or more.
Oh, the experience factor. Yes, probably, yes, experience. I was going to add actually a couple of other things other than education. See, the officers who do not engage as a young, because these ones know the guidelines, right? At least they've been serving as a police officer for 15, 20. And we know from the police culture, peer validation is everything. So these officers, like the older, actually the reason I made 8 as a bench line, because I talked to the cops, they said that when an officer comes to an 8 years of experience, it's considered to be an experienced officer in the eyes of many peers. So they have learned the ways, the ropes. So they do not hesitate in a way. That's where you can see the bias here. Because these officers are still like, okay, what should I do? Should I kill? Or what's the department guideline says? Okay, do I see a gun? No, I don't see a gun. Maybe I should call backup. Okay, because this is how they're still processing in their mind. And these officers are also more educated than the older ones, because the departments right now hire more officers with college education. So probably they're processing the information differently than the older, with the traditional guys.
Yes.
Well, you have something. Sorry, I saw your hand.
I'm just wondering, so 51%, is that for this entire time frame, 2000?
Yes, 2000 to 2017.
So couldn't you argue then that they just had more opportunity to be involved in something that caused them to have to?
Well,
Like, if I just started last week, the chances of me, having been
That's
in
right.
any situation would be fairly
That's
low,
right.
where if I've been there for 8, 10,
That's true. Like, statistically also, yes, we need to say that. Statistically, actually, we have 18,000 police officers, more than 1.1. And it's so rare. We have officers who do not even draw their guns for the 25 years of career. We have that, especially in rural areas. Forget about that. Such incidents so rare. The officer just come to a small town, talk to the people, make the arrest. That's it. That's the entire police work. Those officers that we see generally work in the metropolitan police departments, where you have a variety of situations, dangerous, less dangerous, and everything. And that is true. Yes, that also a kind of confirmation that officers in the more they work in the department, the more they will face such situations, and they have to make such decisions.
Has it made a difference with them inheriting the military equipment and the SWAT team type equipment and the larger vehicles?
I collect that data too. Yes.
So is that mentally making them think we're
Yes.
like, I mean, almost, I hate, this might be a really bad analogy, but almost like Hitler's men, who didn't think and didn't feel that it was another human being. All they saw him was as a Jew, and that was why they were to hit. And in order to protect our government, our judiciary, and elected officials, are they basically the same thing?
Well, again, it's hard to make such big argument because there's no data in my own mind. But there is some kind of police culture we know. Well, I think I forgot to mention this side here. Okay, this is an important. So I asked the cops. I said that what are the most common call types, and I added those. And then I have actually more than this, And then if anything doesn't fit, then they can always select other and then add the new type. So this kind of confirms what the data, nationwide data. And if you talk to a cop, the most dangerous police work happens in responding to a domestic call. Because these people, they are in a kind of intimate relationship, or they're kin, relatives, and the cops are the outsider. Even though this person is being called to the scene as an assistant, but suddenly things can turn against the cop. And you're in a hostile situation. You're in a hostile ground. You're somebody's house. Okay, and you have to defend yourself. That brings a different, confrontation mentality. Wanted suspects are the ones people are already being out, searched at large, and they're traffic related. Again, most of the, police work, they say, I just talked about it on Wednesday, there are more than 100 million cases in the state court system. 20 million of those cases are regarding to serious felonies, and the rest of the majority of them are dealing with the traffic related. This kind of confirms that actually, when I asked the question, how many of the students in the class have an engagement or an encounter with the cops, it's always the traffic. Probably if I ask the same question, you will probably once or twice being pulled over by a cop. So, but these things, escalates. Even though there's a force continuum, right? There is the presence of the officer, the verbal contact, command, and then it should go that way, but no, this is just a theory. Cops arrive, pull you over, then you make a move. You either, speed up, boom, that's it. In the mind of an officer, now I'm gonna get you. It becomes this personal vendetta. Like when you start to run away from a police pursuit, the cops like, okay, we're gonna get you, man. And then this is all becoming a different mentality. Moves from a simple, question, a probing incident to a deadly situation, okay? And kind of shows, in what situations are the most dangerous, situations. Yes, sir.
Sorry, I want to see.
Oh, come back? Okay.
I wanted to talk about the issue.
I have to use the time wisely, but, sorry.
I wanted to talk about the issue of domestic disturbance. When you mentioned of it, I never knew that I would talk about it. Now, I want to think of psychosomatic attitude of the police.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them have been addicted to drugs. Some of them are, because of transfer of aggression.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them, they have hidden agenda. They have committed crimes. They want to cover it. And if they know any suspect, want to leak their secrets, they do away with it with such a person. So in that wise, I believe.
But keep that in mind too. The
regardless
officer,
of any age of experience.
but the officer, when they responded to a house, the 911 presumes it as a domestic response call. So those things you mentioned, they don't know. The cops come to a house because the mother, one of the members of the household, called them and asked help. Either somebody has a gun doing crazy, or boyfriend, girlfriend going crazy, some battery, beating or whatever. So they weren't there actually. They weren't looking for a wanted or a person with a criminal history. They just showed up, and then boom, things went in a different way. Because when people see cops, remember, even first of all, it's hard to grasp the idea that your loved one called the cops on you. Psychologically, if you see the cops, like if your wife called the cops on you, man, this woman just called me, called the cops on me. Like, you're already like agitated, aggravated, like and now you see them like as an outsider, a threat, and that's why you don't subdue automatically. You say, what are you doing here? You resist. The more you resist, the things escalates fast. Okay, so here's another, and then I'm going to get back to my main topic. So this shows the distribution by seasons. It's kind of almost equally distributed because remember, crime rates, there's a trend, right? Summer times in December or January, especially serious felonies always go up because people are outside, entertaining, whatever. But here, I couldn't really find anything. I've been looking at each year, each state. It's so hard, almost equally distributed for some reason. Because I think cops are always out there. They're always trying to look for traffic violations, domestic disturbances, take place almost every day of the year. I think that's why. On the right side, I wanted to see any particular day. This is based on the percentages. Thursday, right in the middle of the day, and Friday seems to be, but again, only the Wednesday seems to be the lowest. But even you look at the percentages, small margins, not statistically significant. So it is hard to make a judgment. So I look at the mornings, the time, like what particular time, because James Fife from New York City did his dissertation on police shootings in using the data from MIPD. This was his suggestion, like let's look at the lighting issue, because if it's dark, the visibility is diminished, so cops probably engage more because they can see, they will hasten their decision. So this is kind of interesting. Noon, since it's a very 1 hour, right, 59 minutes, that's why I think it's lowest. But if you look at the nighttime, especially after 5 p.m., it's going up, but then it's going down because it's only, again, 1 hour. But if you take all the consideration and come to the 4:59, most of the shootings actually happens when it's dark. Again, it matches with the scholarly research finding. Most cops are afraid if they can't see anything. Remember, that's most of the things. Like, come forward. The person stands in the door. There is less light, and then boom, or traffic. You're being pulled in the nighttime. The officer is already scared, and then he can't see certain things. Boom. I think this is one of the ways that you can interpret. I look at again the months. It's very similar to the days. It's nothing really sticks much. The numbers are very, very close to each other. Distribution of police shootings per location. I have the states, cities, and everything, but again, I don't want to get into it. So I come up with the locations and the specific locations, right? So we come up with residential, transportation, business, commercial, entertainment, and other places. I actually put everything under, and then urban areas. But as you can see, it matches with the domestic calls. Most shootings take place inside the buildings. Okay, buildings are most dangerous, grounds for officers to be in. Compared to regions, West, because of two states, California and Arizona, are the two highest states. Actually, sorry, California and Nevada are the two highest states in West. In the South, Florida and Texas are the top two states. In the Northeast, it's in New York. In Midwest, it's Illinois. What other state too? So this is kind of most of the shootings, take place. Now, let me bring to my real issue, the lawsuit, okay? So I spent a lot of time on the project and everything, but I wanted to give you a sense what the data. So unfortunately, there is not a scholarly work on, most of the scholarly work on the lawsuits against the police departments focuses on, not on the police shootings, but the police misconduct, okay? So that's when you go after the cops. Either you're being put under false arrest, malicious prosecution by the cops or the district attorney. Okay, that's when most people generally go after the police departments. But in recent years, because of the events taking place, the shootings, it also became a question: how much do we pay against this? And there are actually a couple of studies. Washington Post did another study, which is actually, and this is from the Baltimore Sun. These are the numbers showed, like this is actually kind of new, 2014. Los Angeles paid out $54 million. New York paid out $730 million. Oakland, 74, California area. And it shows, it kind of, again, it's not from the scholarly work. It's just the newspapers find their own investigative, journalistic study. So I kind of said, what does my data say? What does my data say, right? So again, Washington Post study in 2015. They went back to 2000 and tried to look at it. This is what they found. 18 civil lawsuits, over $1 million. The review also found the families collected, this is kind of interesting, more money if they settled before the criminal cases. This is what I can confirm. This is my research also showed the same thing. Money comes, if you take the decision, go to trial, that's a wrong move. That's my recommendation. Wrong move because government has the resources, they're going to fight back. But if you settle before the court, you will gain something. Again, this is a situation, you're making a, this is a hard situation for a family. You already lost someone, and as if like you're trying to chip on that death, but it's not the goal. You're trying to find responsibility. You're trying to make people accountable. So if you take this further, the longer road, that's it. You're not going to end up a lot of money. Deep pockets, it's being taught in the law schools, I guess. Instead of going after the individual officer, that's a wrong move again. All right, go after the city. Who employs that officer or the police department? If it's a small town, do not go after the police department again. Go after the city, because you will be paid. The city is willing to, pay rather than a police department or a police officer. Some families take it as a personal issue based on my research again. They go after intentionally the police officer because especially the officer is being terminated. They want to go after and pay, but we're talking about a police officer. What's the highest salary for a police officer? And you're asking, even $100,000, it's too much. Okay, so, you have this idea, federal lawsuits, 1983. This is coming from this law from 1871, Civil Rights Act of 1871, which was designed to fight against the KKK at the time. Now, the famous section, Title 42 and Section 83 became famous. Most of the families go with this avenue. They, sue the police departments or the cities in the federal court, district courts, and that's what they demand, compensation. So based on my, research, from 2000 to 2017, this many, basically, lawsuits took place. See this, 2014 and 2015? This is how I interpret, because of the Michael Brown effect. I think so. Or maybe it's the media started to, to publish such information. Not that because we had always law, maybe the information became so available, then we started to see, more. And the reason 2017 is low because we were at the time when the students collected this, we weren't finished with the 2017. So probably this number is not that low. Probably it's around the same of the 2016, even more. But I have to, to confirm that. Let's look at the victim's perspective, right? Who goes to the court? You have the females and the males. So based on this data, for 468 cases, again it matches with the overall shooting involvement. 4% females versus 96% males. Here 7% females, 92 or 93% males, male victims of the shooting. Over here, I wanted to make some ratio assessment. Even though, you can't compare New York City to a small city, right? Of course, New York City has the largest police department, 40,000, more than 15 million people living in the city. Their jurisdiction is larger, bigger, threat levels are. So it wouldn't be fair if you just compare New York City to other cities. So let's make the ratio based on the department and the number of lawsuits. So this is the top 15. I have more, but I just cut the 5 or 10 as the lawsuit number. So California with 149 lawsuits, specifically police shootings. We're not talking about police misconduct, false arrest, all the other things, or corruption. No, this is specifically the use of excessive force. Remember, 3 things generally you can sue a police department: false arrest, malicious prosecution, and the use of excessive force. And that's what I focused on, excessive force. And then followed by New York, Illinois, and Texas. It kind of matches. Those are the larger states with the larger police departments and also the larger populations. Then I wanted to focus on any kind of interesting correlation between the ethnicities with the number of lawsuits. Again, African Americans have higher numbers than the other groups. Actually, whites also. Whites actually, when it comes to females, white females, because in terms of gender, white women also have a high percentage involved in shootouts. Mental illness also is higher in the white females compared to minority groups. That's kind of matching up with that number. The police departments with the most shootings, from again 5 is the cutting point. New York City, Los Angeles, Cleveland, it goes like that. Oakland Police Department. Now let's talk about the numbers, right? Settlements and trials. So far, New York City kind of holds the record. Okay, see, this is what's generally taking place in a lawsuit case. You always demand more, right? I recommend you always demand more because they will never give you that money. If you demand less, you will get less. You demand more, at least you will get some more. Okay, that's the idea. So in this case, actually, they requested like $40-something million. So they ended up with $16 million. Okay, which is so far the highest, one of the highest, settlements regarding to police shooting. And then Long Beach Police Department, California, paid $6 million. But this is what I noticed for the last 2 years, especially. There are some cases I think it will rank higher because we didn't add it into our databases. Again, I consider it as a Michael Brown effect. Now more families coming forward, more lawyers are willing to take such cases and going after the cities and the police departments. And this is also what we're seeing. More cops are being terminated, especially for the last 3 years. You never see that. Like it wasn't. Now the departments are like, okay, I'm going to relieve myself. All right, this guy's off duty. Whatever you want to do with him, not me. So this shows a different change. Okay, that's also another research. For the young students, I don't know, you might want to do a research on that. Why the police departments are quitting or terminating their officers, not backing up. So this seems like another shift in the police culture. It kind of shows the small amounts. There are certain cases the families only want $1. Symbolic number, because they want to be victorious. They want to prove that they win their case. It's not about the money. They don't want to chip in their own mind, chip on their dead ones, loved ones. So it's just they only ask $1, $10, and they sometimes sometimes $100 they return, give money to a library. There are certain cases. So I came up with a design. Again, this is developed through the terrorism studies because we always look at how the terrorism attack is devastated or not. There's a scale. That's how you measure some of those terrorist attacks. So I said, let's look at the estimated monetary damages and come up with a scale so that people can understand how much such cases impact taxpayers. So more than $10 million, very severe. There's only one case based on the data. I guarantee you this number probably for the last years kind of go up a little bit. And most of them, here, 1 million to 10 million, substantial, and 500 to 1 million, and it goes like the $1 to 900, close to. So this is another important piece. Okay, so just because you have a lawsuit, that doesn't mean that your lawsuit is going to be affirmed. Majority of them, with a very high percentage, is going to be dismissed. Okay, I talked to former prosecutors, like why is this the trend and everything. Couple of them, I can't generalize this, but based on my personal conversations, this is what they told me. They said that it is hard to prosecute a police officer. First of all, this is a federal lawsuit. You're a federal attorney or representing the federal government, and police you need to work with the police officer, and it's hard for a prosecutor to go against the police department. So for that reason, most prosecutors how do we stop this? They try to take the side of the cop, the police department or the police officer. So because they don't want to put themselves in an awkward situation because they always work with the departments and everything. See, it seems like a biased approach. Unfortunately, that's a personal note from a couple of the prosecutors. I can't verify that information with the fact. So that kind of confirms dismiss or no verdict. Sometimes the judge says there's nothing here. It's a frivolous or nothing. I'm not going to make any decision on that. They deny the entire thing. It doesn't even arrive to a situation, a settlement or a trial. It's just another thing for the families who go through this avenue. But the ones that are affirmed is again very minimum. That means they won their trials and they really won this things. Settlements, most of them dismissed ones. That means probably went to settlement outside the court. The city approached and said, all right, let's end this, we will pay because we don't want this to continue because the media grabs on in the major cities. So this is what, trials take longer time. Another thing, like a shooting happened in 2000, sometimes the final solution in 2007, 2008, 2009. It takes 10 years sometimes. It's not like, I lost my son today, I'm going to sue the city next day. No, and then a month later, everything is no. It doesn't work that way. Most families, you see the numbers, come from the minority groups, or even the whites, they're not coming from the very, high income, neighborhoods. They can't afford a lawyer. They can't pursue such things in the federal government because you have to go to a federal court most of the time. So they can't afford that unless some pro bono work, some law firms engage in, for their publicity or whatever, and that's how you can make a decision. That's why sometimes a case doesn't even start after 4 or 5 years after the shooting incident, because that's where the family finds the money, the resources, and then they take their cases. So my future study suggestion is probably I need to enhance the data which we are working on it, and then I need to look for deeper correlations between the court types, settlement details, especially time-wise, and then the demographic, makeup. And I need more information on that. That's basically it. That's my, conclusion. Any questions? And I guess we have only 7 minutes left.
There have been erratic shootings.
Shootings where though?
Shootings.
In this country? Okay.
Both in the US.
In the world?
Then I wanted to give more, supply more answer into what I'm just saying. I'm buttress it up. Number one, shortly when I came in last year to the US, there was this case of a particular guy from, I think from Maryland, was it?
Maryland?
No, Maryland. No.
Maryland.
Yes.
Is it the Las Vegas?
That killed 2 cops
Oh, okay.
in New York.
Oh, in New York?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. There was one Chinese cop, and then the other guy, they were in the car. Yeah, the guy approached from the window and they shot them, yes. Dead blank, yes.
So that one, it was very it. What is the remedy? That's number one. Number two, a particular police officer in Nigeria, Ireland, where there was a kind of domestic violence. He just met another woman, a friend of his wife. Because of that anger, he killed both of them and he killed himself. So, you imagine the rate of crime shooting in every fabric human life. So, what do you think? What do you prefer as solution? What do you think? No.
I think as an American society, we're still, struggling the racial
In a way, what did you
segregation. I mean, this is what I see. There is still, look at the statistics in this country. Who lives under the poverty line? Who is the underclass? Who is the, look at all minorities. We don't, and when you are in that, vicious cycle, what's that, cultural poverty? Oscar Lewis, I guess, defined it in 1930s. He talked about this, cultural poverty. When you're in that situation, what are the options for you to succeed? The crime, like in general, becomes an alternative. So in that conditions now, the government, I think you also talked about this morning, police uses as a social control mechanism. And they focus on the minority groups, and this becomes a frustration for the minorities, and they respond back. It doesn't justify their response. Definitely it's wrong. It's a definitely wrong way, but there is some kind of vicious cycle. You behave this way, you block most of the opportunities. The result is unfortunately bad. That's my personal take. Yes. Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you for your well-researched work, and I'm very impressed. Fortunately, both of us are in the same profession. I just want to say that it is not only restricted or limited to the US. Last year, like I told them in my presentation, I presented a paper on crime criminality in South Africa. I think it's a general trend nationwide, all over the world, for the state to protect law enforcement agency, because if any policeman or a cop is convicted, it's an indictment on the government. Yes, and I think it is wrong. It strictly shows that some people are above the law, above the constitution of the land, which is very, 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 very bad. Now, in my write-up last year, I said that there is police brutality is very real in South Africa, because some of them are also they are also criminally minded. Apart from, okay, I want to protect myself from shooting the other person, because most of the time, even in law, the proportion of the defense should be, the defense should be proportionate to the amount of the attack.
Correct.
Most of the time, it is not.
That's right.
It is not. So I think maybe those of us are in the legal sections, have to look for a way where the government will be held accountable.
Correct.
The conviction of the police is very 14%.
That's
it's
right.
very
Yeah.
bad.
That's right.
So I think we have to do. Thank you.
That's right. Welcome. Any questions? Go ahead.
I just wanted to get on the idea of police training, and we're talking about these officers. When they first start, they're constantly thinking about what are the protocols, how do I attack this problem, at the front end of me. But at the same time, I've even looked at training tactics of simply switching your sidearm.
Oh, that's true. I forgot. Yes.
I mean, a lot of officers nowadays have a taser of some sort or anything like that, which can easily be substituted. So in that sense, have we even started looking at?
Yes. Okay. This is an interesting area. I've heard it from the experts who study the tasers. Okay. The problem with the tasers, there is no standardization. You have many manufacturers, and they produce different types of tasers. I think there was this case, this man tased and died, a couple of months ago. So this shows the different types of, taser. So first of all, they suggest that the people, the scholars who study this, the government should intervene this, the federal government, not the state. Look, there is a certain way the taser should be manufactured, like a certain voltage, because NYPD uses a different taser than Washington, police or other police departments. So we might think that it's a non-lethal way, but sometimes because of the differences, this also causes a death. But that's an approach. Yes, tasers should be introduced. And I know major police departments have the financial resources to adopt it, but small police departments, they can't buy it. They don't have the resources to buy it. And maybe we can make force for really a certain departments, a certain number of crimes in their jurisdiction, or a certain number of police officers that the federal government can fund them with that such. Yes, sir.
But are you or anybody else compiling statistics?
No, I'm not
on
compiling
taser
any.
shootings?
No, not tasers. Tasers, I didn't. I have the tasers, but I'm not looking at the.
Non-fatal shooting still is shooting, just not with bullets.
That will be my second thing. Seriously, I'm seriously considering going back and start focusing on the taser event and see has there been any kind of correlation. That's. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
So you mentioned how a lot of the times when there's actual settlements, it's with the city, not with the agency itself.
Correct.
Do you see other, like if the officer is not fired, do you see other
Wait.
penalties or other ways that they bear the brunt with that, rather than just the agency being untouched and the city having to pay for it, and then the culture,
The thin line with the policing is
like other accounts?
this is a blue brotherhood, right? So the public, and one of the core principles of the police, they believe that public do not understand them.
Yeah.
That's one of the research findings. Like police believes that they are the only true crime fighters out there. The public don't understand them. So now the government, this is a very thin line, thin ice. If the government starts to put their hands on them, tries to curb their power and everything, I don't know. It's just I can't really come up with a good solution. But there must be something done. I think it all comes down to training. That's what I see. Like number one is education and the training of the officer. That's the only way. Otherwise, anything will be seen as negative or positive. All right. So, if any other questions, thank you very much for coming. Thank you.